Let's take you back out to the main stage now with Bill Ford. He's being interviewed by the CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Baruah.
I want to talk to you about heritage, and I want to talk to you about next generation mobility. So kind of both ends of the stage.
Yep.
So question one, your great-great-grandfather.
Just one. Just great.
Just great. just great-great-grandfather. Okay. 112 years ago, founded Ford Motor Company. Mm-hmm. When I listen to you and when I listen to the other executives at the company, I'm always struck at how Henry Ford's vision and values are still resonant in Ford Motor Company today. So how do you, as the executive chairman of this great worldwide institution, take 112-year-old values and make them relevant to today's 21st century global marketplace?
Well, because the values are really timeless. I mean, look, my great-grandfather, just one great, wanted to...
We all think he's great.
So he wanted to make people's lives better, and that expressed itself in a variety of ways: the $5 a day wage, the profit sharing, obviously the Model T, which was affordable to the average person. And so I feel like it's my mission to keep reinterpreting, what does it mean to make people's lives better today and ultimately tomorrow? And so that's pretty timeless. And we have a really strong culture at Ford, which I love. And I think it really came out during the darkest days of 07, 08, 09. Our employees simply wouldn't let us fail. And everywhere I went, the employees would come up to me and they'd say to me, "Hey, Bill, we can do this. Don't give up." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, usually those messages are top down, and they're all coming to me. And it really reinforced to me how strong our culture and how good our culture really is. We are a big company, but we're still a family company. And yes, it's my family, but it's all the extended family. And it really is how we treat each other, too. One of the things that I love is when we have new hires, I always meet with the new hire groups. A lot of those new hires come from other companies. And they always say, it's really different here. People seem to really care about each other, and it does feel like a family. And that's a value that I very much want to keep alive.
So when I look at Ford, you have created this thoroughly modern, successful 21st century company that's kicking butt in the marketplace, yet you're still adhering to these values that were established 112 years ago. So the way I look at it is that you have created a new future while honoring your past, right?
Well, actually, I don't think you can create a future if you don't know who you are. To us, it's really important that we have a sense of grounding. And I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, and there's the energy and the creativity and the ideas are fantastic. But one of the things that I realized is that most of those companies don't have a culture. And as a result, the second the next new idea or the next cool thing comes along, people just pack up and go. And I think that that's fine if that's what you want. But I think a company needs stability, it needs continuity, and it needs to know who it is, and it needs to provide a reason to work beyond a paycheck. You have to believe you're belonging to something that is worthwhile. And if you get back to what I said a minute ago about making people's lives better, if our employees really believe that, and I believe that they do think that's right, then it's not just about them and their paycheck. Obviously, that will always be important, but it's not the only thing. And so one of the things, as I spent all these, trips out to Silicon Valley over the last 10 years, I was on the board of eBay for 10 years, and I would go around and visit the Valley companies. Yeah, there's a lot we can learn from them, but frankly, I think there's a lot they can learn from a company like ours about the value of a culture. Because as I say, out there, it feels like a bunch of gypsies.
Are there lessons from the Ford experience of honoring its past while creating a new future that you can translate to the state of Michigan? Because Michigan's kind of in the same boat. We're trying to create a new path for ourselves as a state, but we want to honor our past.
Well, there's no question. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what are our core values here? And I think our core value, one of them is hard work, but also we know how to make things. And we know how to make things that last here. And so, you know, so the ideas don't have to be generated in Michigan. It'd be great if they were. But ultimately, we can be the place where those great ideas come to life, and we can make them here. So I think, you know, as we think about, and I guess we'll get into the future of transportation mobility and kind of how that's going to change radically. The one thing, if we do this right, is that all that can be made here in Michigan. And I think that's really exciting. Now, we'd like to have more of the value chain. We'd like to be the generator of the ideas and ultimately the implementers. But at a very minimum, we can make it here better than anybody else can.
So speaking of heritage, 2015 has been a really big year for Ford Motor Company when it comes to bringing back some iconic nameplates from your incredible stable of names. And I'm referring to the Continental and the Ford GT. Yeah. Which, first of all, you want to tell the story?
We don't have a picture of the GT. I wonder what.
I think we have.
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So you want to tell the story about this this car?
Well, I don't want to, yeah, I'll do it briefly because a lot of people here probably know it, but what was interesting about this car is that literally we kept it a secret. And to keep secrets in an auto company in a town like Detroit, it's pretty hard. So much so that we actually, the only way to get in the room was, you know, no high-tech pad or swipe card. You had to have a physical key because there were only 5 of them. And we really kept it secret, but we wanted to do this to honor our heritage, but also to show, you know, what lightweighting, what carbon fiber, what high-strength materials can do. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a very cool supercar, but a lot of these things could be replicated then into other products and into production. So that was very fun. And the Continental really is, you know, goes all the way back to my grandfather, Edsel Ford. And that was his...
And your father, who had the Continental Mark II.
The Mark II, exactly. And that was his love. So, you know, for me, this was a vehicle we couldn't screw up because, you know, to me it was very important to honor my personal heritage with the Continental. And so I took more than an average interest in that project.
If we could go back to the Continental slide, I don't know if we can or not, but I want to ask you about the design language of the Continental. So, you know, Lincoln has been on, let's call it a journey for the last several years. And the Z, the MKZ, the MKC, the new MKX, which is about to hit the road, has had a very bold, very successful design language that has been very, very well received by everyone. This is a very significant departure. It's a beautiful car, but it's a very significant departure. So is this the new face of Lincoln? Is this going to be a standalone look? Where are we going with Lincoln?
Well, we'll see, because one of the things with what we call the bow wave or the split wing grille that you saw in those other vehicles is it really does well in some, and others it doesn't translate as well to. And when we started thinking about the Continental, you know, we first tried to make that look work, and it never worked. It never looked right. And so finally, the team came up with this front end, which all of a sudden made the car look elegant, and it looked great. And so, you know, I don't want to say that we're definitively headed down this road for all new Lincolns, but I'm very happy with the way this one came out.
Very cool. Well, good luck with that. So let's switch a little bit to Bill Ford's personal journey.
Well, now we can put them all to sleep, so this would be great.
No. So now, you have a lot of friends in the audience, and they know your background and your passions, but I think for people who don't know you as well as some of us, it's surprising to see someone whose last name is Ford, who has gasoline in their veins, is a Mustang fanatic. You're into sustainability, and you've been into sustainability way before people even knew what that term meant. So I'm curious, how did Bill Ford get interested in sustainability? How has that shaped your vision for the company?
Well, it was interesting. So I always loved the outdoors as a young man, and spent every moment I could outdoors and in the woods of northern Michigan, fly fishing and camping, and I loved all that. And then I went to the university, but what really opened my eyes was at the university when I started hearing professors talk about the auto industry being, a horrible polluter. Because I grew up thinking the auto industry was great, provided jobs, it was all good. And all of a sudden I got exposed, at age 18 to a school of thought that was quite critical. And then I started to explore, well, is this real? And, yes, a lot of it was real. So, but I was shocked when I graduated, went to work at Ford, and realized there was nobody talking about that. And there was nobody even acknowledging that at least there was a portion of society moving away from us. And it struck me that if we didn't get on the right side of this issue, we could end up like the tobacco industry. And I didn't want our employees to ultimately have to apologize to their family and their friends for working there. And so, put another way, for most of my life, and your life too, Sandy, cars were a great thing. They were freedom, they were the fun of driving, it was the open road, it was, great sound system, back seats, all the fun stuff you could have in a car. And people wrote about, songs about cars and, all the cool stuff. And then all of a sudden, this black cloud started looming over the industry, and it occurred to me that we needed to remove the reasons why people didn't have unfettered joy of their car and of driving. And so it really became about removing a negative. And if we could do that and get on the right side of the issue, I felt that it would really enhance our brand as well. And that we would attract ultimately the best and the brightest young people, because it also occurred to me that if our young people were in universities hearing what I was hearing, we weren't going to get the best and the brightest because they wouldn't want to work at an industry that they thought was potentially a social liability. So, yeah, I remember when I joined the board of Ford, I was told I had to stop associating with any known or suspected environmentalist. And I said no, and that went over well, as you can imagine. And then I was the first person from industry to address the Greenpeace annual conference in 2000. And I don't know who was more freaked out about it, the Greenpeace people or the people back in Dearborn. But
what was that like? I mean,
well, it was kind of surreal.
It's like Barbara Streisand showing up to an NRA conference.
Pretty much.
What is that like? Pretty
much. I mean, at best, they might have thought I was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that was some of the nicer terms that they used. And then, as I said, I got back to Dearborn, and they said, "You just did what?" But again, I thought it was important to build bridges between these communities. So fast forward now all these years. And last year, there's a group called Interbrand that tracks brand images. And last year, Ford was named the greenest brand in the world, not just auto brand, but of all brands out there. Ford was,
wow.
Which is pretty cool. So the journey was worth it. It really was. And now there's no resistance at all. I mean, not only within Ford, but really I think our whole industry gets it, and we're just moving on with it. But those early days were a little difficult.
So another area where you've been really ahead of the curve and a real thought leader is this area of mobility, next generation mobility. Car sharing, connected vehicles, vehicle to infrastructure communication, vehicle to vehicle infrastructure. So how did you kind of see around the corner on that one?
Okay, so I gave a TED Talk in 2011 about this, and basically, if you think back to what I said about the environment, removing negatives, well, one thing that became clear to me, and I gave this speech, that for most of my career, we worried about selling more cars and trucks. But then if you just do the math, 7 billion people to 9 billion people by mid-century, 1 billion cars on the road today to up to 4 billion by mid-century, where were they going to go? There was already gridlock in urban areas all around the world. And I thought, so I stood up and said, we can't just shove more vehicles into ever more crowded urban areas. It simply won't work. And therefore, just as we wanted to remove the negative on environmental issues, if we didn't solve this mobility issue, moving people around, then we were going to be, in short order, only able to sell to suburbanites and rural dwellers. And again, if you go back to your first question, which was, how is Henry Ford's original vision relevant today? Well, again, if it's about making people's lives better, then how can we apply that thinking? How do we make people's lives better who live in big cities? And that won't mean traditional car ownership as they've known it in the past, because already in big cities, people can't move. There's gridlock, if you go to Bangkok, you go to Sao Paulo, you go to Shanghai, I mean, really anywhere, Los Angeles. In fact, we probably feel at least in this country, but we also feel it here in our major urban areas. So then the question is, okay, how do we change the equation? How do we solve this problem? How do we make people's lives better by providing the freedom of mobility to them? And I talked about that in 2011, and I remember the reaction I got was a little similar to my environmental early days. Wait, you're talking about selling fewer vehicles? My point is, look, this is going to happen with or without us, and I'd like to have it happen with us in a leadership position. So it is going to change dramatically. I think it's going to be very cool. And in fact, for the state of Michigan, I look back at the period from the founding of Ford Motor Company in 1903 to about the Great Depression, and the level of innovation, the capital inflow, the entrepreneur activity that happened in this region was unprecedented anywhere in the world, and it really set us up for a standard of living that lasted about 70 years. It was incredible. I actually think we're about to enter that same phase again in this state, where we are going to have tremendous innovation, you could call it disruption, entrepreneurial activity, big inflows of capital, if we do this right. And so I think this is super exciting, and rather than be threatened by it, I think it's an amazing opportunity.
So talk to us about so that's a little bit about your kind of journey in mobility.
Right.
Tell us about the company's journey. So those first early days, I can imagine would have been, I'm sorry, you want cars to drive themselves, you want cars, you want to sell fewer cars. Tell us how the company's evolving.
It's interesting. Within the company, there was basically general agreement. Now, granted, 2011, we're still fighting our way out of dark days. So, I think there was a general recognition, yes, this is true, but also, hey, we've got to work today to solve today's issues, also true. So, but, there's been almost no resistance within the management group. In fact, they completely get it. And we understand now that we're in a time of great change, and that we need to be very thoughtful, figure out, what's our point of view on this change? Where can we lead? Where do we play? Where do we not play? Who do we partner with? What is the business model going to look like? Is it going to be more service, more software, less hardware? All those kinds of things that we are working our way through. But and the tricky part, Sandy, is going to be 99% of our company's got to be working on today. They've got to launch products today with great quality. They have to deliver the fantastic products, service them well, and finance them well. But there has to be an element in the company, and there is, that is thinking about how we get to this future, and what does urban mobility look like, and how do we help lead in that. And so we're really almost on a parallel path. And Mark Fields and I talk about this a lot. What is the appropriate level of distraction for our company? Because the one thing we can't have is everybody focused on all this mobility, and we've got today's task at hand. And so it's actually a very exciting time.
So what is the future going to look like? So I know you just said you really don't know, but if you had to guess, what does the car of the future look like, and how are people going to buy, or maybe buy is the wrong word, how are we going to use transportation?
Well, it's going to fragment. First of all, urban mobility, I think, will look very different than today. I think when you get outside the cities, it will look pretty similar in many respects to today. So you're almost going to have a bifurcation of the transportation market. And in cities, you're not going to have, there's not going to be a silver bullet. There are going to be lots of different options. But one thing is, I think all forms of transportation are going to have to be linked together on a network and all talking to each other. So if you as a customer want to travel from point A in New York City, you know, if you're uptown, you want to go downtown, you might have an option of taking a subway, a bicycle, walking, a bus, but all those forms of transport need to be in conversation with each other so that people can move in the best and optimized fashion. And you may have a choice of saying, do I want the cheapest way or the most direct way? And then you can choose, you know, what way you want to do it. So I think everything's going to have to be in a single network. What's going to get you there? Yeah, we'll have autonomous vehicles. We will have Ubers and Lyfts and similar companies. You'll have fractional ownership like Zipcar and relay rides and things like that. So you know, there are going to be lots, and there'll be business models that we haven't even thought of. But Ford and I believe other OEMs can't be afraid by this. In fact, we have to look at this as the ultimate opportunity to really change our business model to provide our customers something that they desperately want and need. Because again, if we can make people's lives easier and better in urban areas, then, you know, because people look today to Ford as a brand that they respect in transportation. We just need to make sure that in 20 years they're looking to Ford as a brand they respect in transportation. But that may change. So, you know, and we're not even close to being able to dot the I's and cross the T's, because the level of disruption. I mean, there are companies that are on a radar screen that didn't even exist a year ago, but that's very cool. And we just need to be open-minded enough and nimble enough to understand what's going on in the world around us, and to be able to interact with small companies. And that's not something big companies typically do very well, including ourselves. But that's a muscle we have to build up.
So in this brave new world that could be pretty significantly different than the automotive world that we know today, how is Michigan positioned to capitalize on those opportunities, and what are the threats to Michigan's role in that? Well,
look, we start politically. We've got a governor sitting in our front row who completely gets it, and that's a huge, huge advantage. Because
agreed, but he's only here for another 2 years, and then his lease ends.
Well, let's change that. Let's allow a third term. But you need to be aligned with political leadership to enable things to happen. And thankfully, I do believe we have the leadership in the state with the governor, but also with our other officials, that people want this to be the locus of activity. So what does that look like? And what's our advantage? Well, first of all, not only do we have great universities, which we all know about, but very importantly, those great universities are used to working with companies. And that's not true in a lot of other states. A lot of other states have really great universities. They do not know how to work and don't have a history of working with companies. Ours do. That's a huge advantage. We have the most engineers of any state in the nation. That's a huge advantage. And then going back to what I said a minute ago, we know how to build things here. And we build things that last here, and that's a huge advantage. So, you know, it's interesting, people have been asking me, well, are you in a race with Silicon Valley? And the answer is no. Would I like to get more activity here, startup activity? Absolutely. And actually, with Techstars and other, we're off to a good start. So I actually believe that we have the genesis of a real entrepreneurial community here. But it's not a zero-sum game. A lot of great ideas can come from Silicon Valley, but they're better off if they build them and develop them here. The other thing we have here is we have a big customer base. I mean, look at our big companies. We've got the OEMs, a lot of big tier 1 suppliers. We're going to be buying from these new companies, and we can exert influence that they come here to Michigan and participate. So, you know, you add all that up, and unless we really screw this up, we have a great opportunity to be the place where the activity is happening. And and everybody in this room wants that to happen. And that's the first step, because you know, the thing I'm really excited by is the old auto industry, you know, even 5, 10 years ago, would have seen everything we've been talking about put their head down and the blinders on and said, well, this has nothing to do with me. And we would have missed an opportunity. I think today's auto industry, maybe it's because we came out of the horrible downturn, maybe it's a change in leadership, but I think there's a very different attitude throughout the entire industry, not just at Ford, but in the whole industry, about creating a very different future.
And is that why you opened up an office in Palo Alto?
Yeah, we need to know what's going on out there. Importantly, too, we need to have people, let's just think of this. If you're in a small startup in Palo Alto or somewhere in the valley, how are you going to get to Ford? Who's going to take your call? So not only is it us knowing what's going on out there, it's them having an entree point into Ford. So it works both ways.
Very cool.
It is cool.
Bill, this has been absolutely great. Before I end, I've got to thank you. You and your company have been absolutely great supporting something that's very close to my heart, the Henry Ford Health System's Get Your Heart Racing program, and you are giving us a Ford Mustang GT350R to auction off. So you want to say a little bit about the G50, the 350R?
I drove one up here, and
very quickly,
I think I made it in about an hour. I figure if the police were chasing me, I could outrun them. But it's a blast. It's really fun to drive, and it's as good as it gets.
When your staff said you flew, I didn't mean that was a theoretical.
No. I drove that, and yes, I was flying, but it's really, really cool. We introduced that as the auto show this year, and I assume you're going to be the high bidder.
You don't know what they pay me. Well, I'm hoping it goes for a lot more than I can afford.
Well, no, I think you need to mortgage everything and go get it. Believe me, it's worth it.
No, but you can help me get an employee discount on a GT convertible.
A GT convertible? You're talking about the...
No, the Mustang GT.
Oh, the Mustang GT, okay.
Yeah, I'm going to have you sign the owner's manual.
All right, fair enough.
Phil, thank you so much.
Sandy, thank you.
This has been great.
Thanks so much.